Welcome everyone to the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host Michael Pickering, and that's right, Lo-Fi as in low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question, what's going on in the world today? We'll be covering 5 headlines from across the globe and then choose one to go into a more detailed analysis. The news, fresh off the press. Source, Reuters, World Section. Russian-made Superjet wins UN contract for air travel services. These passenger planes will be used for taking United Nations troops across the globe on peacekeeping missions. The UN reported that Russian helicopters are already in use by the organization. The implications. While the US likes to think of its aviation sector as top of the world, it's important to remember that everyone has smart scientists and engineers, no matter where you are. Just because you live in a country doesn't mean your country is the best at everything it does. Further details of the deal have yet to be released. Next up, source, Amnesty International, news. Ethiopia, release detained journalists and opposition politicians immediately. The organization is reporting that last week 2 journalists and 3 politicians of the opposition to the government were arrested, had their charges dropped last week, and yet the police have still yet to release the individuals in question. The 5 people were arrested for taking a photo of a police station and supposedly hitting a car in use by the police. The district attorney dropped the charges as none of these were crimes against the criminal code of the country. The implications. Ethiopia has a history of using scare tactics such as these to silence journalists and political opposition. Their Freedom House score in 2019 was a 24 of 100, meaning they're an authoritarian state, and their Reporters Without Borders score is 110 out of 180, meaning their media freedom has been improving in recent years, but they still have a ways to go, and this situation simply reaffirms that point. Our following story. Source, New York Times, Latin America. Ecuador's former president convicted on corruption charges. That's right, folks. There are countries in the world where even presidents can go to jail. Former President Rafael Correa served from 2007 to 2017 as the country's top political leader. The former president was charged with accepting $8 million in bribes for government services. However, after leaving office in 2017, he moved to Belgium, where he resides today. If he were to return, he would then be arrested and face his 8-year prison sentence, though he can appeal that decision. The implications. Transparency International scores Ecuador's level of corruption as 38 out of 100, meaning there exists a high level of corruption in the country. This court case simply demonstrates how high that corruption went into the government. Ecuador is not nearly alone in the world for countries having former leaders convicted of crimes such as corruption. Brazil and South Korea, just to name a couple. Moving forward in our new weekly segments, we'll be bringing you new country cases illustrating the diversity of political landscapes of the world today. And now for our Headline in the Spotlight segment. Source, 538 Politics. Did Sanders blow it for the Democratic left? Or was the nomination always out of reach? This news piece highlights the difficulty that a far-left candidate has in trying to win a national electorate for the Democratic nomination of president, citing that, generally speaking, Democrats as a whole, at the national level, on average, prefer more centrist candidates to run for the president. That being said, 538 raises an important question. Do candidates to the far left actually ever have a chance? The background and the implications of this story. Historically speaking, the answer to this question has been no. Although Sanders and others may seem to be doing well in some cases, it's a matter of context. In 2016, Sanders and Clinton were seen as the only plausible options. Hence, Sanders came out in an automatic second place. When compared to historical trends, that's quite normal. In 2020, Sanders came out initially strong in Democratic primaries. However, those early primaries voters were not demographically representative of the Democratic Party as a whole at the national level. Once the party moved to primary states that were more representative, Biden began winning, and once again, the party as a whole at the national level tends to be more centrist, as has been the case historically. The question for students of Lofi Poli Sci, will there come a day that this trend changes? Will there come a day that Sanders or a Warren-like candidate can win the party's nomination? Write in and let me know your thoughts. And the last piece of news from the Associated Press News Oddities section. Tiger among animals officials find in search of Texas home. Yes, you heard me right, Lo-Fi listeners. A white Bengal tiger, along with a bobcat, porcupine, llamas, emus, and other animals were found while raiding a suspected narcotics trafficker's home in southern Texas. The implications. What an interesting mix of animals. Why, oh why, do drug traffickers have an affinity for exotic animals? Another case in point. Infamous drug lord Pablo Escobar of Colombia had African hippos, which now have increased in population to nearly 100 in the wild. I know we all like llamas and tigers, but a tip for Lo-Fi Poli Sci people? Leave them be. Just leave them be. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Please write in with your questions, comments, requests of countries for our new segments. Write into Lofi Poli Sci at planetmail.com. That's Lofi, L-O-F-I, Poli, P-O-L-I, Sci, S-C-I, at planetmail.com. Lofi Poli Sci at planetmail.com. Let me say thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, wash those hands, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.